felonies range from, murder, rape, child abductions, all the way down to writing a bad check.
I got it. You make the prisoners go to war. I mean, somebody's crossing the border and they're coming in and they're shooting people. Like, that's the time war is justified.
It's not only ineffective, but the punishment does not stop when they get out.
Instead of having people go out the door to go back into society, the door can instead be just a big guillotine and it just cuts their head off.
No matter what you do, you're going to be either facing more money or more problems.
But I don't think that attention ends when the prison doors begin. Like, your work is not done once you've thrown somebody in a cell.
Even in school, there's people that just don't want to learn. There's people that don't want to work. You've got that in any aspect of society.
Yes, there are a few people, and they're going to be the people that everybody points to. Obviously, they point to the outliers and say, well, see, those are the guys. That's the reason why you need it this way.
To another kitchen sink microscopy. I'm Casey Rochford, and why don't you like and share the video and subscribe to the channel, because that's what all the cool kids are doing.
Yeah, and you want to be a cool kid, right? I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and don't forget, we write our own music, which is available on iTunes and Spotify and such, so stick around to the end of the show to hear a new song. And oh yeah, if you're so inclined, go ahead and check out our website. That's ksmvidcast.com for news, information, and more. So, so Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, there's lately there's been a lot of people considering the prison situation. We've done an episode about prisons, about how it's not so much reform as it is a punitive cage to throw people in and just while away the years. But now there seems to be people starting to wonder, is this a form of torture? And then on the flip side, you've got people who think that we're kind of wasting money on them. It can't be torture because they've got all this enrichment and stuff. And, instead of tax dollars, maybe we should be forcing them to grow their own food and whatnot. So there's a lot of angles to tackle there. And I thought it would be a really interesting topic.
Yeah. I mean, we did sort of briefly cover a couple of things connected with this, but yeah. Oh man. Where to begin?
It's one that we could have dived a little deeper into the sink on, I think.
Yeah. And as with anything, we'll definitely revisit different ideas and come back to topics again. Certainly. Wow. I'm trying to think of where exactly to start. One thing that I was thinking, you'd mentioned the torture thing, and that brings me back to that episode of Star Trek Next Generation, where that species trapped the crew of the Enterprise and performed experiments and stuff like that, and then they were like, Picard trapped them, and they're like, oh my god, we can't handle this, and he kind of gave a little Picard-esque epic speech, and talking about how, even if you haven't done any harm, physical harm, that even just imprisonment can be torture in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. it's an interesting philosophical problem because uh because there's not like right and wrong. There's like levels to it, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
so it's like we've got people in prison for murder, sure, and I think everyone can agree that that's bad and that should be handled in some way.
Yeah,
uh
yeah. The severity of punishment, whatever form it takes, should relate to what crime you've committed, what transgression you've committed. I think it would be dumb if uh, they cut your head off for murder, but also cut your head off for stealing a loaf of bread. Like that.
right.
That's you can't have a one size fits all solution when it comes to that.
Yeah. And this angle that, rather than tax dollars, we should make the prison population be self-sufficient. um I don't really know how that would work with medical. Um, it's not like anyone, any given Joe Blow is self-sufficient at performing their own medical procedures. uh
That's
especially
true.
especially surgery, like, I don't know, heart surgery or brain surgery, you can't really do on yourself
Yeah,
ever.
yeah. You can't have inmates. Well, I guess some inmates could potentially be trained in medical procedures, but yeah, it
Hmm.
wouldn't be something that, like, okay, for instance, McNeil Island, which is close to us in Washington State. In its early days, it was self-sufficient in terms of resources. Like they had farms and they grew food and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
had their own water supply and everything. So it didn't require a lot of outside resources. But yeah, as far as technical things like medical service, you'd have to go outside. But um, potentially the work that is done, whatever it might be, could fund such things. I think the whole pressing license plate thing is kind of dumb. They could certainly be doing more profitable things that would actually generate more than enough revenue. Um, you know, I, it,
Yeah.
it's tough because I don't know.
So
Well,
I mean, not every prison is going to be able to do what McNeil Island did. They were kind of small, but uh, they've being an island, they've got enough extra land around the area that I think that was probably quite feasible uh,
yeah,
for them to do. I don't know if they had livestock or
they
anything, or
did. Yeah,
did they?
they raised pigs and things like that, and that's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah, no, that's cool if they're able to do that. I think there's no harm in that. It's teaching valuable skills too.
Oh,
Um,
especially at the time, we're talking like in the 1800s. So farming was a valuable skill. If you knew how to raise livestock and grow crops and stuff, you could come out with those skills, which I want to circle back to at some point, talking about that
yeah.
concept. Um,
So um, the thing, I think you kind of sort of mentioned that, well, there could be a doctor in prison, for malpractice or whatever, and maybe that doctor could provide services. Well, probably not, because you know uh, the license, any professional license, when you commit a felony, is taken away, and you're not able to get them ever again.
well, but maybe that's part of prison reform. Maybe there should be certain exceptions for prisoners, that if you're performing medical procedures on other inmates, that there's either no license or a special license, I guess, for them.
Yeah,
Um,
it's getting fuzzy in that area, because it's
because
what about malpractice and all that stuff, because it's
yeah, you definitely have to have some kinds of checks and balances. I mean, that's just a thought, that maybe you could have inmates that are skilled in those fields
mm,
perform those services, but you could definitely hire people from outside to do it too, if they had the revenue. Like, I don't know that it has to necessarily be taxpayer dollars. I so okay. I want to start off kind of by proposing this question, because people always say, that you need to repay your debt to society. But does sitting in a jail cell at taxpayer expense qualify as repaying a debt? If you're just chilling there, like whether you work or don't, like how are you repaying anything?
Well, 49 out of 50 states have a pay to stay policy, at least since the mid 90s. So you are on the hook for about $100 a day.
Okay.
And the repayment of that, mostly in arrears, it's around 3% of what they charge is what actually gets paid. So yeah, some people actually do pay their debt, like literally to society.
Yeah,
So it's not all tax dollars going into it. There is actually some little bits coming from former inmates paying their way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you broke even, okay, if there's a debt, right? Like whatever this debt is, if you repay it, I guess it's like the cost to stay in prison. If you monetarily pay that back, I guess through doing work or whatever, you still haven't paid anything in excess of that, which I would expect would be the debt to society, right? Somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, it whole goes into like a completely different tangent of like, is money proper compensation for criminal acts like murder or rape or something? Like, can you just pay some money and be done with it? I guess you can if you're wealthy and famous.
Yeah, what's this whole debt to society crap? Because most of the time, like 99.9% of crimes have a handful of victims. One victim, 2, 10, whatever. Or zero. Yeah, there's plenty that are arguably zero. But it's just funny that like we have this blanket treatment of criminals. There's these people that would be happy to just cut off all tax funding from that and let them just kind of be in kind of like squalor, not healthy conditions, and then so and invariably their argument is always, well, they did whatever they did to get there, they deserve it. Well, okay, if they murdered someone, maybe they deserve something like that, arguably.
Yeah, I'd say that that's extreme enough to warrant some kind of extreme punishment.
Yeah, but felonies range from murder, rape, child abductions, all the way down to writing a bad check, or perjury, or vandalizing federal property. I mean, honestly, most felonies look like they're there just to protect the federal government.
Well, and drug use, drug possession, drug sales, prostitution, all these like truly victimless crimes.
We wouldn't see a very big dent in our tax money at all if we just relaxed on the penal code a little bit and stopped throwing people in prison for bullshit.
Sure.
Because at $100 a day with like 2.3 million prisoners or something, we're spending like, what is that, like 230 million a year?
Yeah. Well, don't we have more prisoners in our country than any other country?
Oh yeah,
even North Korea,
yeah, we suck. But it's like we're spending like 230 million in taxes a year on prison, some of which is being paid back, and we're shelling out 250 million a year on war, and nobody bats an eye when we're.
I know. I got it. You make the prisoners go to war.
No, let's make the politicians go to war.
Oh, I'm completely on board with that. Yeah.
I mean, we're both saying the criminals need to go to the war, but
yeah, one and the same, I guess, in a lot of cases, most cases. Yeah, exactly. I would say if you're a politician that signs off on going to war, you should be the first. You should be leading the charge. In the front lines. If you're not, well, your decree is bullshit. Nobody should comply. But it's a bit of a digression there.
Yeah. So there's this philosophical idea I wanted to toss out there, making that comparison there between prisons and war, and expenditure wise.
Mhm.
If we take a look at those two things from a philosophical standpoint, you've got prisons, which are technically there to supposedly protect society from the wrongdoing folks, people that are more likely to do bad things to other people. And arguably, you could say the same thing about war. If that war, it has a justifiable reason behind it for defending us, which
Yeah, yeah.
that's another topic.
Well, yeah, I think war should only be engaged in a defensive manner.
Yeah.
Which defense doesn't mean defending our freedoms and that kind of such things. That's an ambiguous kind of term. I mean, somebody's crossing the border and they're coming in and they're shooting people. Like, that's the time war is justified in a defensive, internal sort of sense.
Yeah. So my thinking is like, if we're talking about slashing tax money to prisons, which is there to, supposedly protect us, what would be the real difference between like slashing the budget for the military, who's also there to protect us? It's the heroes all, and like villains all pitted against each other. Like
I think here's the thing. I think the budget should be based on like needs and on the how do I put this? I kind of going back to the education discussion that we had quite a while ago. Like, what's the purpose of these things? If you build your budget around the purpose, you don't have to set the budget. It'll naturally be set. Like, if you say war and the military industrial complex are there as an internally defensive system, then it'll be fairly inexpensive because you don't need to move abroad a lot. You don't need forces all over the world and military bases in every single country. You don't need that because you're just defending yourself. The same thing with prisons. If the scope of prisons is reform, and the scope of prisons is, to address the reasons why a person committed a certain crime, and especially if it's focused on actual crimes and not just made up ones like prostitution, I think you'll see far less need. And if you have a targeted approach to it, like, you kind of deal with each prisoner on a case-by-case basis, and you're like, okay, what do they actually need? Do they need to just sit in a concrete box for 50 years? Or is this person a person who really, the reason why they did what they did is something we can fix, But they're not about fixing it. It has nothing, never, ever, maybe like 200 years ago, that might have possibly been a few people's goal. But today it's basically just take them out of society and put them in a hole and leave them there. We don't want to see them. We don't want to think about it. And it's like, I feel like, well, that's why it's so expensive. And that's exactly why you have criminals going back out into society and committing crimes again. Because it's ineffective.
Well, it's not only ineffective, but the punishment does not stop when they get out. Like, not only are you on the hook to pay for your time in prison, but now you're walking out with no credit. You're not allowed to participate in labor unions. You can't get professional licenses. You're disenfranchised from voting, so you have no representation.
Yep. And something important to me, as a felon, you can't own firearms without a huge amount of paperwork and all kinds of hassle and rigmarole and stuff like that. And I think why? If you can't live a normal life, then why let them out ever? At that point, if you have the mark of Cain for the rest of your life, then just why not just, instead of having people go out the door to go back into society, the door can instead be just a big guillotine, and it just cuts their head off. Like, execute people then.
Yeah, I mean, if I go down to a courthouse and spray paint fuck Trump on it, and I go to prison for a year or something, and I lose my job, and I lose everything, and everyone abandons me because I'm just a felon now, and I'm dirt, and then I come out and I'm already pissed off that I had to go to prison for a year. Now I don't have money, I don't have a job, I got bills that I used to have, and they're all in collections, and everyone's on my ass, and I'm homeless. I'm pissed off. I'm extra pissed off.
Well, not only that,
you know what people do when they're fucking pissed off?
yeah. They go to the courthouse and spray paint fuck Trump on it. Yeah, I mean, and that's the whole thing. Like the label kind of thing really drives me up the wall. Like, these labels, these very broad strokes that people paint other people in, like felon or whatever, or sex offender or something. It's like, you could just expose yourself in public and bam, you're a sex offender. And people don't differentiate between somebody who raped like a 2-year-old kid, Yeah. Those two things are very different, but yet the label in people's heads creates the same impression. And such is the same thing with a felon. Like you said, some of this stuff is just bureaucratic. It's not like real things. You can be a felon for bullshit reasons, and you're put in the same box as somebody who murdered 50 people.
Yeah, you can't tell me that seeing a penis is just as bad as being raped when you're 2 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Please don't even try to say that you're mentally scarred from seeing a penis. That's not a sex crime. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same kind of thing. Like, if you write a bad check or perjure yourself, or there's even more ridiculous felonies, by the way. If you look up the list of them, the vast majority of them are completely nonsense, just the stupidest things that would, like, in the normal world, be something people would be like, that sucks. But, now all of a sudden, boom, you're taken by force and you're shoved in a cage and for however long, and you have no freedom, and then you come out and you have no freedom.
So I'm my thinking then is, if everyone's got such a big problem with paying taxes for prisons, let's just shut them all down. Nobody goes to prison. You know what? If you're so worried that these are all such dangerous people, you should be happy to be paying that tax to keep them off the streets. But if you're so pissed off that if you want that extra $20 on your paycheck every year, or I don't know how much it actually comes out to, but it's not much. If you actually want all that back, well, then you should be fine taking a risk having, the small percentage of actual violent offenders out on the street, just doing whatever they want. We've got stand your ground laws. If you see them doing something wrong, you can kill them, right? So,
well, okay, that's a good point. But we don't. It doesn't necessarily have to be an all or nothing kind of situation. Yeah, I think there's room for nuanced analysis of this kind of thing, and say, hey, again, it goes back to that whole kind of like, what's the purpose of things, and what do we hope to accomplish by doing this? And if the purpose is keeping people safe and that kind of thing, well, okay. I don't think you have to imprison prostitutes and drug dealers. I think those are business people, and they're not harming anybody unless they're doing it by force. And the bureaucratic kind of things, you could probably just have a little bit of a fine or something. It's just, but if somebody rapes somebody, murders somebody, whatever, does something really heinous, then they do need some kind of attention. But I don't think that attention ends when the prison doors begin. Like, your work is not done once you've thrown somebody in a cell. In fact, it's just beginning, because the point of you're putting them in the cell to keep them there to do something, right? And if you just stop and do nothing, well, you've forfeited your opportunity for improvement, and you've actually made society worse, because now they come out no better than they went in, and probably worse, actually, because who are they around? A bunch of criminals, you know?
Yeah.
What do they learn? They learn stuff from other criminals. It's not improving things.
Yeah.
And
There really needs to be a distinction. I mean, I know they've got classes of felonies, but they're all called felons.
yeah,
And
and they all
really,
go to the same place.
yeah, if you are not impinging on somebody's autonomy, if you're not taking their life, if you're not, tying them up and removing them from their home and putting them in in a cellar somewhere, if you're not doing any of those things, you shouldn't be considered a felon.
I agree. Yeah.
Writing a bad check, lying to somebody under oath, lying to a police officer or whatever, any of that stuff, maybe a monetary fine. Maybe most of that stuff I would say shouldn't even be a crime. But
yeah, I agree. And you can call it a felony, but it needs to be handled differently. Because again, you have to go back to what's the purpose of the punishment, or should it even be punishment? Should it be reform? Maybe in some cases forced reform, like in the case of rapists and murderers and really bad people. You really need to try to sort out what's going on, and I would say a lot of what's going on is probably mental health issues, because normal people don't do those things. Maybe in really extreme situations, you've got relationships that go south and murders happen and stuff like that. But even those kinds of situations, it's different than somebody who deliberately just one day wakes up and decides to go walk around the park and grab some lady and knife her and kill her and rape her, or rape her then kill her, whatever. But
yeah.
Those kinds of things, they're very different, and there should be some attention to that. Like, we need to be making society better, right? You don't make society better by just pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I don't really see a way of making it better without relaxing the penal code, because you could say, okay, well, sure, it's not fair to treat them all the same if, somebody wrote a bad check and somebody is a killer or whatever, but they're all in the same place. So how can you effectively treat them differently? How can you give enrichment to the bad check writer and restrict it from the murderer without creating this kind of class system within the prison that's going to create even more problems? I can tell you right now. Or building another prison, which, hey, more tax money there, and keeping them separate that way. No matter what you do, you're going to be either facing more money or more problems. More money, more problems. So,
yeah, that's a good point. Maybe changing what a prison actually is would go a step further. Maybe it should be more like a school. Well, of course, schools are kind of like prisons already in some places. But the focus should be on betterment. And yeah, you're not going to avoid that kind of classification of people. I think that's going to happen no matter what. You're going to have people in there that murdered somebody, and they're going to resent the fact that they're in a box while the other person who just wrote a bad check is sitting at a desk learning accounting or something like that, and civics, or who knows. But that's fine, because hey, guess what? You murdered somebody. I guess you're going to be dealing with different consequences, because there's consequences whether the law is there or not. In fact, it could be argued that that's a better consequence than what would happen in a vigilante sort of situation. So, like, I think one of the things, as far as, I just kind of want to go back to the whole tax thing and the cost of prisons and stuff. And I think very, very, very strongly, I believe that prison inmates should be working to earn their keep. They should be doing something for several reasons. One, it gives them something to do. Two, it pays for them being there and their treatment, whatever it might be. Hopefully it's not mistreatment. And also, third, it gives them a sense of accomplishment and something like a skill set to carry out with them. Because like you'd said, you know, you come out of prison, you're unemployed, you're homeless, whatever, you know, you've got all this debt and people breathing down your neck and stuff like that. You got no skills, you got nothing. Your skills might, you know, you might have gone to prison as a teenager for dealing drugs or something. You come out 20 years later, you don't have any skills. They don't, first off, they don't even teach you shit in school. So good luck there. So I think it should be kind of like a vocational school sort of thing. Like you should be learning stuff and doing things and building things, and it should be stuff, whatever is currently money generating. So if we need coders or especially right now, people like medicine, people to make masks and stuff like that, hell, do it. Fire up the machinery and start making things. And because I think that would go a longer way to providing like the repayment of debt to society. Like inexpensive products for the masses as a result of these people who did something really awful.
Yeah, I mean, we already do have them work and all that stuff, and there are education programs and stuff, but it's all really subpar. They get like 83 cents a day.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's complicated. Like, how does the economy work in that fashion? Like, if they are working, how exactly are they funneling that money back into their own care? It's not like a direct sort of thing, right? You know,
not quite. And maybe that's, again, it comes back to kind of reevaluating the structure of prisons and how they operate. Like, because I think we're going, it's sort of this like mirror station kind of patchwork. It started off one way, and over the years they added things to it and modified this, modified that, but the core is still the same, and it's falling apart. And so I think maybe a complete overhaul would be good in that sort of sense. Yeah, because originally it was taxpayer funded and stuff, and that's kind of where all the funding really comes from. If they do a bunch of, you know, menial work and get a few pennies and generate $100 a day, I guess. But here's the thing: you know, they could be doing a lot more valuable work rather than these kinds of stupid ass tasks that are just there to waste time and make them do something. I think the focus should be on generating revenue, like whatever it might be. I think it's possible, and it has way more beneficial effects than the current system.
Yeah.
Like, because it should go back to the whole idea. What is the purpose of prisons? It should be reform. Yes, there are a few people, and they're going to be the people that everybody points to. Obviously, they point to the outliers and say, well, see, those are the guys. That's the reason why you need it this way. Well, they're few and far between. I think most people can change and will, especially if given a good opportunity. The prison system that we have now is not a good opportunity, and you can't use the outcome of the current prison system as justification for its existence.
Right. Yeah. So when we did this last prison episode, the confusion over corrections, one of our viewers commented that prisons do provide educational opportunities, social therapy opportunities, and all kinds of other things. However, the key is that the prisoners need to want to take those opportunities. And that's obviously going to be a speed bump. Sure, there's always, I mean, even in school, there's people that just don't want to learn. There's people that don't want to work. You've got that in any aspect of society. Like that's not an excuse to treat this any differently. You know, we still provide opportunities to regular citizens, even though there are some lazy slobs that don't give a shit, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just the way things go.
I would say, like, in general, the prison system should be at its core like a closed vocational school that also has public facing sales of its services. excuse me, like barber school or something, right? Or a massage school. You are learning stuff, but you also are charging customers to perform those services at a reduced cost because, well, you're still learning. Same
Yeah.
would be with the prison inmates.
Prison tattoo parlors.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you could do things like food service or all kinds of things. I mean, it's like the possibilities are endless, and I can't even fathom what they would be, but they would come into being if allowed to go that direction. I think if you just say, well, yeah, the prison labor system should be based entirely around chain gangs, dudes with shotguns, like making people dig ditches and stuff. Well, that's bullshit. That's not really that valuable of a service.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Exactly. Oh man.
This is the way he wants it. This is the way he gets
it. Oh man.
Yeah, I like everything we talk about. It's not black and white. There's not just one way that you can handle something as complex as egregious acts against society, whatever level they might be.
Mm-hmm.
I for one would be happier to see less people in prison, because a good chunk of the people that we're putting in prison didn't do anything that bad.
True.
And the whole disenfranchisement, yeah. Here, as I open another beer, that's probably not a good idea. That's a constitutional amendment, like the 14th Amendment or something. Basically says, hey, you do something wrong, you don't get to vote anymore. And 1 out of 6 African American males has been disenfranchised. And
yeah,
there's evidence to show that that's kind of possibly the reason that Al Gore didn't win the presidency in 2000. And there's thinking that it's in the Republicans' best interest to keep people in prison, particularly black males, because black males tend to not vote Republican because, for whatever reason.
Yeah, some societal or cultural things, I think. I mean, however you feel politically about it, that is definitely an issue.
Yeah.
And I think, didn't we also talk about whether prison inmates should vote?
Yeah, and to some degree, that's one of those complex situations where, federally in the Constitution, it says, you're a felon, you can't vote. But states handle it differently from there. For the most part, that's always true, but depending on the level of your felony, sometimes you can regain that ability. Sometimes if you're on probation, you never get disenfranchised, stuff like that. And it's very widely variable depending on where you're at. But all in all, they are a part of the population. They do have a stake in the future of the country, and they should be represented.
Well, and not only that, but really at the core of this is they're human beings still.
Yeah.
Even somebody that's done something awful is still a human being, and they deserve to be treated with respect in as much as they deserve it, I guess. And I don't like the idea of removing rights, especially ones that kind of go down to the human rights level. Yeah, okay, if you go to the high level stuff, bureaucratic things, that doesn't really matter. But as far as like your ability to stay alive, your ability to speak freely and think freely and those kinds of things, and basic human rights kinds of things like not being abused and beaten and stuff like that, I think are they still apply to even to the worst criminals.
Yeah. Well, I think health, we've debated about this before, but I think health is a human right. And I see no problem with keeping prisoners healthy because, like you said, they are human beings. No matter what kind of crap they did, at some point you gotta stop, you know, uh, being cruel to them, or just kill them and get it over with, because there's that in between there, the cruel and unusual punishment, the torture, the Guantanamo Bay bullshit that we really need to be avoiding.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, and I think there is a difference. Excuse me, COVID-19 coming down on me. I think there's definitely a difference between a person who's free to move about and work and do whatever they want. They have different needs, and I don't know that. Well, I mean, we could argue about rights all day long, rights and entitlements and all this stuff, but there's a big difference when you are forcefully incarcerated, that you don't have a choice. You can't get out. You're basically beholden to your captors. So I think if we, the citizens of the United States, are the captors, we should be providing for the basic needs of somebody, and not kind of abandoning them in a prison cell.
Yeah.
If you decide to put somebody in that hole, you better take care of them: food and water, fresh clothing, bathing, and yeah, if they get sick or need medical attention, they should have it.
Yeah,
Now, I
because
think
here's the thing: if you think that they don't deserve that kind of care, then you're also basically saying you don't care if they just die in that cell, which you might as well just say, well, whatever they did wrong, if they're in prison, they just deserve to die. Might as well just send them to the death penalty now, because why drag it out? Basically, you're saying that you don't think there's a way for them to rehabilitate. You are just assuming that because they did something that was against the law, which is really arbitrary.
yes.
They did something against the law, so you think they deserve horrible treatment. What does that say about you? Because, like, what if that happened to you? What if
Well,
you accidentally wrote a bad check and somebody brought the hammer down on you, and you would feel like you were there unfairly? You'd be pissed off, and somebody out there would be like, well, you did something to land there, so you should just die of malaria or something, or dysentery, like on the Oregon Trail, or whatever. COVID-19
yeah,
is making its way into prisons, and you're basically like trapped, and you've got
yeah.
nowhere to run now, and there's a deadly virus like swarming around in the air.
Yeah, and you have very subpar medical treatment. That's a good point. I think it comes down to empathy, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and say, well, what if I were that person, and kind of analyze the situation from the other side.
Yeah, people
Um,
need to learn that.
yeah, and here's the thing: like you had said, what if that happened to you? Well, guess what? It can happen to 100% of us.
Yeah.
It's been said that every single person could be charged with a felony. There's so many laws out there, so much legislation. It's so convoluted and complex that basically every one of us is susceptible to getting charged with a felony. So it's not a what if; it's a matter of when. You
Yeah.
know, so you do, and I think everybody has an interest in kind of reforming this system. I think starting with reforming laws would be a good place to start. Like, why are they even there in the first place? Why is somebody who, sold sex for money, like, why are they sitting in a concrete cell against their will? Like, it makes no sense. How about people who decided they wanted to buy some plants or some chemical substance? Like, why are they in a cell, or somebody who sold it? No one was doing anything against anybody's will, and yet now they're in this cell.
Yeah.
And there's even, it goes way more ridiculous than that. There's just this, man, I don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, it's a huge topic, and it gets people heated for sure. Like I know I get pretty passionate about it because like I've been, I haven't like been this like crazy felon or anything, but I've been on the wrong side of the law. I was a punk teenager. And
Weren't we all?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I would have been really uh screwed over if I had been caught and punished in such a way, and like, you know, I'm not saying I've contributed a ton of great things to the world or whatever, but what I have contributed would have been lost entirely. You know,
Yeah.
what this boils down to in any situation, like when it comes to human rights and this whole like white supremacist and stuff like that, and people saying that gay people suck, it's like, you do you realize you are suppressing great potential? Maybe not everyone is the next Einstein, but somebody could be. And some one of these felons could be the guy that would have gone on to cure cancer, but instead his entire life is ruined because he spray painted "fuck Trump" on a courthouse.
Well, yeah, and that goes back to this whole purpose of criminal justice and stuff. Like, I think it's really important to ask the question, why did somebody do what they did? People don't tend to do that. They're just like, oh, that person did this bad thing, or they violated this piece of legislation, therefore this. Well, that's very programmatical of you. Good. Let's all be computers. I think being a human being, you can think a little bit more deeper than that and start to analyze things on a more or a less than black and white level. I think there's reasons why people commit crimes, and it could be bad things that happen to them too. Some people, they have a horrible home life, a horrible upbringing, and that influences them. And I think that's something to address. And I think it's something that people should be thinking about when they see these people. Like, why are they there? Why did they do that? What's wrong? What has happened in their life that brought them to that? But we don't do that, especially like with the media and stuff. It's not at all like that. And our prison system is based around that the same kind of programmatical response. It's like, here's the thing. Unless you can tell me exactly why uh, psychologically or biologically a person did a particular thing, I don't want to fucking hear about your solutions. Because if you don't know why it happened, then every solution you propose is bullshit. And I think that's what we have. We have people who maybe have good intentions, but they just don't know. And they're just trying things. And it just so happens, out of sight, out of mind. You put somebody in a cage and you don't have to think about it. So it seems like we've done something good and it seems like we've fixed it. But obviously we haven't.
Like, a thought just occurred to me, like, people really shouldn't cast judgment on things that they've got uh like zero experience in. Like, if you've never been driven to the point of, like, oh, I gotta steal this food because I'm too broke. I gotta risk going to prison so I don't die. So my kids don't die. I've got to grab this loaf of bread or whatever and stuff it under my jacket. If you've never been to the point where you've had to contemplate whether or not it's worth breaking the law to survive, or anything like that a good chunk of these people probably do, like prostitutes and drug dealers. If you've never done that, you're not a peer. You don't belong on a jury. What if juries were entirely made up of felons? People that
I completely agree, because that is your peers. It should be people in your same socioeconomic status, like
yeah,
people in your same neighborhood
it
or
should be
something.
random too, because
Yeah.
like, you get to all these lawyers get to basically pick and choose who they can exclude. That's
Well,
bull.
And consider this, the jury has the power of life and death in their hands.
Yeah.
One juror, in some cases, can basically condemn somebody to die.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal.
Everyone should check out our episode on jury nullification,
Yep.
separating right from law. Yeah, check that one out, because that's a very important and related topic that you need to learn about.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I don't see the current prison system having the right direction, the right sort of vision, I guess, as far as what it hopes to accomplish. I don't even think it hopes to accomplish anything. Like I said, out of sight, out of mind seems to work. And then they leave it at that. You slam the door and okay, we're done. And then give somebody just enough to keep them going for the next half century. Well, like you'd said, what if that person were somebody with great potential? And here's the thing: you don't have to be an Einstein to have great potential. You don't have to be Elon Musk to have made a difference. You could just be somebody who just happens to know what to do in a bad situation and saves a life. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
Or even just helping other people. Somebody who's destitute, and you give them a helping hand, or you give them some advice or something like that, and change their life. Like, there's a hero right there. And we don't know who those people could be. And I think we should be focused on helping people be the best they can be. Ooh, I don't want to go into the army slogan, but be all you
Well,
can be.
actually, that brings up another philosophical thought I had in the comparison between prisons and the military industrial complex. A lot of people are scared of socialized medicine, but they're okay with socialized medicine for soldiers and veterans, because that's what it is. And they justify that by saying that each and every one of them has sacrificed for the sake of this country. So a lot of these people will also willingly admit that no two felons are alike. They'll when you point it out, they'll say, okay, a check writer maybe shouldn't have it as bad as a murderer, but you're willing to take away healthcare and food from all of them. Why are you willing to pay for medical for each and every veteran? Because don't try to tell me that a paper pusher that just orders MREs is somewhat akin to a guy who takes 6 bullets and still carries his buddy off the battlefield. I mean, they're all great people, don't get me wrong, but there are some who are way more heroic, way more deserving of good benefits than just every average Joe Blow soldier. I mean,
that's true. And I think the people who do those, the Purple Heart recipients, will probably, their needs are going to be greater. If you've physically, you're somebody who's done the desk job for the military, you're not going to incur any kind of real injuries compared to somebody who's been on the battlefield. But again, it goes back to the limiting the scope of these things. Same thing with the military. Like, why do we have bases all around the world? Why are we still engaging in military actions with countries that really don't impact us at all?
Yeah. Unless we're going to let other militaries put bases in our country, we should get the fuck out of theirs.
It's a good point. Can't argue with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same thing goes with prisons. Like, it's the scope of action, like what we hope to accomplish. And I think with prison, we should hope to accomplish a lot more than we do. Yes, I think prisoners should be doing work. They should have education. I think it should be a self-funding operation. And I definitely believe that it can be, if executed intelligently, not haphazardly like we do currently. Like almost everything that happens at the state level. But I think that there should definitely be a focus on trying to improve people and analyze why people did what they did, and maybe make things better. Maybe it's just that somebody was abused as a child, and are we going to abuse them back because they lashed out from decades of abuse? I, I think that's very cruel and unusual, honestly.
Yeah, we have a way in this country of justifying punishing victims. And
Mm-hmm.
this is really no different than, punishing victims. People that had a shitty upbringing, people that had the worst of circumstances come down all around them, people who just got frustrated with all the bullshit. Uh, I can empathize with that. I really
Yeah,
can.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that the vast majority of people who are in prison right now are people who would otherwise be decent people if they happen to have the right cards dealt to them.
A lot of them
Uh,
probably are still decent people.
yeah,
Just one thing you do does not define your character. That
no,
that
but
really needs to be like underlined several times in the captions.
uh,
Uh,
I agree. But unfortunately, in our culture, one thing that you do defines most of your future. And I think that's wrong. I think that's actually the heart of what needs to be addressed. You can't judge somebody by one singular event in applying to the totality of the rest of their life. And if you do, I think there should be an approach that is measured and rational and science based, I guess. Like we don't have any science in prison. we, we don't really analyze whether what we're doing is actually having a good effect, and
yeah.
and don't really critically think about like what we can do to improve it or anything like that. And
Actually, there's another good example that relates to the military in recent news. I guess at the time of the airing, probably about a month ago, that Navy captain, Crozier, I'm maybe butchering his name, but the acting SecNav relieved him of duty because he violated the chain of command by CCing some admirals on an email requesting to get some relief for his ship that had COVID positive patients on it. He wanted to protect the rest of his crew, and they relieved him of duty.
huh, wow,
And
that's
so here you have an honorable decorated officer who just put his balls on the chopping block to save hundreds of sailors, and he loses his job over it because he went against the chain of command.
for for what he presumed to be the right course of action too.
Right. Well, yeah, he saved hundreds of lives of soldiers. And
But
and and we have the same sanctimonious people saying how much they love the soldiers, saying, "You're an asshole, you're going to lose your job because of what you did.
yeah,
Because you
but
saved your soldiers." God.
and now he'll forever be remembered as somebody who was relieved of duty,
Yeah.
and
That's one
not for the
act
reasons
defining his
why.
character. That one act defines his character now because everyone needs to play it by the book.
Man, people are so shallow. Uh, man.
It's the state of the world is so frustrating right now. It really is.
Well, and that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
We talk about it. Um, yeah, I think we've covered more than we set out to talk about. Actually, that was, and I
Yeah.
still feel like there's a lot we could talk about, but I think that's
Yeah.
enough for now.
Yeah. This will be something we come back to, I'm sure, and
Oh
we'll
yeah,
probably have some comments and some notes to bring up on a future episode, I'm sure.
oh yeah, definitely.
This was actually a fan request, so we'll probably get some feedback.
I hope so. Hopefully, we covered everything that particular fan wanted to hear or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah.
Whether or not they're still a fan after this, I don't know.
I hope so. You know,
You
one event in your life, one action can't define the totality of your existence.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah. I guess it does online, so sorry.
All right. Well, if you've got some thoughts, which I'm sure you do, because we all do, go ahead and leave them in the comments here. And don't forget that like and share and subscribe business, because you're cool. And all the cool kids are doing it.
Yeah. And thanks for deep sink diving with us into all things prison and military and, well, all things, actually, as usual. So, yeah.
Don't drop the soap, everybody.
So check out the song on the way out. It'll probably be a good one. Maybe. Hope you enjoy it.
Some real confidence for our music there.
Well, you know, we don't like to toot our own horns, right? You know?
All right. Good night, everybody.